screen is the city where Uber is now operating. Over 450 cities in 72 countries, racking up 2 billion miles every single month. And 7 years ago, that screen would have been blank. It's a remarkable achievement. And how do you feel about this right now, where Uber is?
Well, look, the way I like to describe doing the Uber thing is, it's kind of like driving a car. You're going down the highway at a pretty good clip, pretty fast, and then all of a sudden it becomes foggy.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of grab onto the steering wheel a little bit tighter. Maybe a little bead of sweat comes down. You don't have time to look back, and you can only see so far ahead. And so it's hard to imagine. It was super hard to imagine way back then what it would become, and we still haven't really taken the time to look back and say, wow. And it's just as crazy to think about what could happen in the future.
Don't you have a statement of new statistics you're prepared to make right now?
I mean, we've got a lot of statistics. I think we have, somewhere around 40 million monthly active riders. Those are paying riders. Drivers making about, I think in the last month, it was somewhere between $1.5 and $2 billion that they got paid in a single month. And, so you think about it, 40 million monthly active riders, paying somewhere in the neck of the woods of $50 a month. It's just been a pretty substantial and wild ride, but one in which, supporting millions of drivers that 5-6 years ago, they were either underemployed or unemployed. It's pretty interesting.
You probably get asked this all the time, but how did you get here? I mean, to here.
Oh, I took an Uber.
You made it just under the wire. Was the car there on time?
The car's there on time.
Okay.
I was taking my time.
Okay.
On the way over.
Okay. Do you drive a car?
I don't. I have a car in my garage, and two things have happened. One, the alternator belt is broken,
Okay.
and two, my driver's license is expired.
You're not a car guy.
I used to be. I grew up in LA.
Okay.
So it's hard to be in LA and not be a car guy.
What was your first car?
My first car was a Nissan Sentra 1986 that I bought for $1,200.
Okay, that says something. Okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
it was white,
your new
but
headquarters.
I thought it was gray.
Your new headquarters, I heard that you have 450 parking spaces. Shouldn't everybody be taking Uber to work and back?
Well, look, sometimes I like to say being Uber means being efficient, but sometimes that means not taking an Uber.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that we're the solution for everything in the world. We try to be, but we're not.
Well, we've talked a bit about the change in your logo, because I thought you had a brilliant logo when you first started. Could we just put it up on the screen? And you have very definite opinions of what happened and why you changed it.
I mean, clearly the right one is better.
Yeah, okay. I think the left one is better, but yeah.
That's okay. Look, I think people get attached to the old, especially when I think the first time you use Uber, it's that experience where you pushed a button and a car appeared. And there can be an attachment. This is the thing you tap every day. But the way we feel about it, well, look, the one on the left here was made in 2011. I mean, there was one before it, which was a red U magnet looking thing and a C magnet, the same thing just turned on its side, and that stood for Uber Cab.
Mm-hmm.
And we changed it to that. And when we changed it to that, we got so much hate. That icon you love, you know how much hate we got when we introduced that one?
The first one.
The first one. And so we did that in 2011. We were in 2 cities, San Francisco and New York. And we only did black car service, so it was super high-end. This was meant to be kind of like a badge that might be on a luxury car. But what had happened was we went from this sort of luxury service that was in 2 cities to being in 400, 500 cities around the world, 70-plus countries, and also not high-end anymore, but something that was more populous, more of the people, for the people kind of thing. And that thing on the left doesn't say that.
The thing on the right looks like a pharmaceutical company, though, to me.
Well, look.
Like an eyewear company or something like that.
with
But they're-
expansion opportunities.
Those are supposed to be roads, I take it, or
Well, no. So what we have is
or
we
veins.
have. Next question. I'll riff and we'll go, but then
Okay.
we'll spend the entire time doing that.
No, we're not going to. But the thing in the middle, is that the car and then the
No.
road? Okay.
All right, you asked for it. Here we go. Look, the way we think about where Uber sits is we sit sort of in the middle between bits and atoms. That black box, or that box you see in the middle there, is we think of the square as sort of it's an icon for us of the bit, is software, technology, automation. The circle is atoms. The line that connects to that dark box is your journey. Now, the pattern that you see behind it, actually, if you go to different countries and install the app in different countries, you get a different pattern.
Mm-hmm.
What we try to do is localize the pattern so that it feels local.
Okay.
Now, it's not the perfect implementation, but we're moving fast, and so we put something out there. And I promise you, you'll see over time this gets better and tighter over time. I've got some things in my, up my sleeve that I think you'll actually like. But stand by.
So the brilliance about Uber was, and it was brilliant, is not having the cars. But by doing driverless cars, aren't you going into the car business in a certain way?
Who says we're going to own all of them?
So what, the Uber drivers who drive now will have that little thing on top, and
Well, I think there's all kinds of implementations, whether it be folks who own fleets. The drivers might even own cars that then get converted to being driverless, and they make an income off of it or a revenue of some kind. And it's possible we could own them. I think there's a lot of different models for how this is going to work, and I don't think anybody has a clear sort of definitive idea of exactly how it's going to go. But when you talk about when that transition happens, let's say that transition happens over 10 or 15 years, you're talking about replacing 80 million cars in the U.S., 100 million cars, something like that. I mean, it's going to be a huge, huge number of vehicles that when you multiply by 20,000 or 30,000 or $40,000 per vehicle, you're literally talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
okay, you're zipping down the highway at 60 miles an hour, and the grid goes out. What happens then?
The cars will be able to drive, they'll just be able to drive.
But what happens if you're sitting in the back seat, and
Yes.
the steering wheel's in the front seat?
Well, who says there's going to be a steering wheel?
Well, you got to control it if the grid goes down.
Well, no, what grid are you talking about?
The electrical. Okay, the electrical
You're going
grid.
old school on me. What is this? Look, I think you make sure these things operate, even if the sun isn't shining, or if the electricity has a little hiccup.
You take them, right?
There are batteries in these cars.
Okay.
They run.
Okay.
They do their thing.
But you take the driverless cars back and forth places? Because I know you have them in the city here. We saw one the other day.
So there's a few cruising around here in SF. They're doing some mapping and just seeing how things operate here in the city. We have driverless Ubers taking passengers around in Pittsburgh, which is where our advanced technology center is sort of based. Mm-hmm. And we, so you can push a button and then a driverless Uber comes up. Of course, it has a safety driver there too. And it's a lot of fun. And you can see when the driver is driving the car, you see in the back there's this iPad sort of visualization, and you can see the car sort of on a Google map sort of doing its thing. And when the software is driving the car, you see what the software sees. And so it's the digitization of the physical world is what the software sees, and to expose that to the passenger is a really fun and interesting moment. Sort of, we are starting to enter the future.
Are you having trouble getting people to be early adapters to this, or
no?
Other than the novelty of it and be able to tell your friends.
I mean, a lot of folks feel like it's smoother and better than a human driver, at least in the parts where it's able to go. So these cars cannot go everywhere.
You mean they're mostly urban?
Well, not only urban, but they can handle certain urban environments, and then certain urban environments they can't.
Like New York, say.
Well, no, it just depends. For instance, if there's not a lot of pedestrians, really wide roads, no oncoming traffic, that's going to be, and no weather, that's going to be easier than narrow roads, lots of pedestrians, unprotected left-hand turns, and there's a number of other sort of complexities that can determine whether a self-driving Uber is capable to be self-driving or not. Now, ultimately, you want to get to a place where there are certain routes and certain places where it can just do its own thing, and it can do it safer than a human can. But that's just a matter of time, and it's going to take a certain amount of time to not just make that possible somewhere, but to make that possible in most places is going to take years, if not a decade or more.
And I assume they'll be exponentially better 3 years from now than they are right now.
Of course, yes.
Now,
and the question, though, is that the progress sort of gets asymptotic at some point, and you hope that the asymptote happens after it gets better than a human driver. But nobody knows for sure yet, and that's the science and engineering that's going on right now.
Now, congestion and pollution are a big part of your company in trying to reduce that. How has that gone so far? Is there anything quantifiable?
Well, look, so Uber Pool is a big effort that we started a couple years ago along these lines. Those who have Uber Pool know, but I think there's still a lot of folks who don't know. You push a button, car comes just like it did before. You open the door, you get in the car, except now there's somebody else already in the car.
Some weird guy already in the car.
There's an awesome person in your community that you can have a great conversation with. And it's because two people are taking a similar ride at the same time.
Okay.
The more popular the system gets, the more likely that kind of scenario happens. And the more that happens, well, the lower the price gets, and the lower the price gets, the more people do it because they can afford it. And so right now, 20% of all Uber rides globally are Uber Pool rides. And that means we went from a situation where there are two people in two separate cars to two people in one car. In fact, we have triple and quadruple matches often. So it can be you're taking 3 or 4 cars off the road. And for the driver, it's amazing because they pick somebody up, they pick somebody else up, they drop somebody off, they pick somebody else up. They can have these sort of what I call perpetual rides, where they're making money for an entire hour and sometimes hours at a time, getting very efficient use of their vehicle, their asset. And we're really reducing traffic, we're really reducing pollution. It's just better for cities.